Thanks for staying until this last session, which will focus on the stakeholder interaction. So I will start first, and then Arne Larsson will follow. And I'll talk about first a bit of theoretical background of why is stakeholder interactions in cross-border arrangements important, different levels of engagement in cross-border arrangements, and then an example of the public debate on the Technocenter. So, well, first of all, I'd like to ask you to reflect on what would be your experience if you were a resident in one of these houses, or if you had an economic activities, for example, in this narrow street, and you see these huge boilers coming in and going into another country. So what would be your feelings? What would be your, would you have liked to be informed about this? Would you have liked to be engaged somehow in the decisions about the time of when this transport was going through? Or would you have liked to be consulted? So I'm not going to be a spoiler here, but just to keep you aware that this will be explained later on by Arne. So, and this leads very nicely to why stakeholder engagement is important. And for this, we have three rationales from the theory. So the first rationale is the normative. So we may think that it's the right thing to do. There are some democratic principles, there are some democratic values, ethical responsibilities, and it is for this reason that this needs to be respected. And therefore, people, communities have the right to participate in the decisions which affect their lives, the environment, or the future, for example. And this is why, an example, indigenous communities may be involved in the planning of nuclear facilities, because they have the cultural and the historical rights in land use decisions, in land planning decisions. Another rationale could be the instrumental rationale. So it helps the process to succeed. What does it mean? So then it increases the acceptance of certain decisions. It increases the legitimacy of the process outcomes. So really, when people feel they are heard, when people feel they are involved, they have more trust in the process and fewer conflicts. So this may be another rationale, that we would have smoother implementation and stronger legitimacy. So it could be, for example, that a company may need to involve the local communities, but not because they think they believe in the democratic participation, but rather because they want to gain the buy-in, they want to gain the acceptance, and this might be a way to reduce opposition and to get the approval. And then a third rationale could be the substantive rationale, which leads to better decisions, because here we improve the quality, we improve the relevance of the decisions, because we are involving the people who have the local knowledge, the contextual knowledge in a certain situation. They have different perspective, which may enrich the whole process and lead to better decisions. So, for example, we may think the regulator incorporates indigenous knowledge in the environmental monitoring, and this provides a unique place-based knowledge that improves the overall assessment of the environment, for instance. Is one better than the other? Really? Well, it really depends on the objectives that you have. It depends on the context. It depends on the audience. For example, the instrumental one may be seen as really manipulative. And the substantive one may lead, you can have the benefits of the inclusion, the inclusive participation. But you can also have a combination of the three. So it really, again, it depends on the objective, and the best maybe to combine the three of them. So going back to the legal or the normative, I'm sure most of you have heard of this Aarhus Convention, this rights-based approach, the need for the public to have access to know, to have access to environmental information on the one hand. So these three pillars have the right to participate in the decision-making process regarding environmental matters, and the right to have access to justice, to protect ourselves to a healthy environment. So there are yet not public that we know available cases where the Aarhus Convention Compliance Committee has directly addressed recycling or import-export of radioactive waste, but there are examples related to nuclear projects where public participation and also access to environmental information were central concerns. Another piece of legislation which is extremely relevant for the cases that we are explaining today is the ESPO Convention for Environmental Impact Assessment in a Transboundary Context. So this addresses these activities which have environmental impacts in this transboundary context. And this applies to nuclear power plants and also radioactive waste management facilities, nuclear facilities in general. So in this case, there is an example, there are several examples also of, for example, Lithuania raised concerns that Belarus was violating the ESPO Convention because they didn't adequately assess and communicate the environmental impacts of the Ostrovets nuclear power plant located near the Lithuanian border. So we see that this is the legal framework. We have a legal framework, but we also have from the theory, different levels of engagement in cross-border interactions in cross-border settings. So when I ask you in the second slide, how would you feel about this big truck with these huge boilers coming through your street, for example, if you were a resident there or if you had your economic activity there and you saw this coming by. So some people might like to be informed about it. So for some people, we have all this spectrum of levels of engagement from low public engagement to high public engagement. So from the people who want to keep updated, so those who want to receive clear, timely information about why this is happening, what's happening, when, where this is happening. And this helps to build transparency and to prevent misunderstanding between countries, between communities, between the proponent, the operator. But for some people, this is not enough. So a higher level up would be this consultation. As you see, the arrows show very well from which level we go. From the consultation, which would mean we want your feedback. So people can react to certain proposals, they can raise their concerns. So you might involve the neighboring communities or even the neighboring countries in this consultation. And this shows respect because we listen to their voices, and it helps this cross-border communication, this cross-border to understand, to identify the cross-border risks and the values early on. But again, for some people might feel that their feedback, their reflections are not, their concerns are not addressed in the final outcomes. They are not really taken into account. So for this, then we move really to what is engagement at this mid-level of public engagement, which would be the involvement, which would mean let's work through this together. So it's a higher level up where we go beyond this feedback, we actively engage, and we are not just reacting, and where, for example, local communities on both sides of the border are part of this discussion throughout and not just at one phase of the process. And this helps build mutual understanding, and it helps the ownership. But even then, we can have a higher level, which would be the collaboration, where we'll make the decision together. It's not only let's work through this together, but we decide together, we co-decide. So in the form of working groups or joint committees. So we really have this joint responsibility, and we build this long-term trust. And finally, the most advanced highest level of engagement, which would be the empowerment, the delegated power. So the public decides, you decide. It's really hard to achieve this one, but it builds the strongest legitimacy. So the different actors have different needs. And it's important that this is also reflected on how the engagement, how the participatory processes are set up. And the different levels can adapt also to the different cultural, legal, and political settings across the different borders. So I'd like to now go to this specific case of the Future Center in Fessenheim in France. Not sure if some of you might have heard of this. So this was Fessenheim, where there were 2 reactors were shut down in the year 2020. And now EDF proposed to, through the subsidiary SciLife, to build this techno center for recycling very low-level waste, so close to natural radioactivity from the dismantling of nuclear power plants and from the maintenance of the production fleet. So, the reactors had employed 700 staff, they employed 200 contractors, and also indirectly they had people in the maintenance, around 600 to 2,000 people. And they contributed to 16 million euros in tax to the local authorities, and 70% going to the Fessenheim commune. So it was a really huge loss for the community when they shut down the nuclear reactors. So the waste from these reactors is now going to this CIRAT, managed by ANDRA in the OF, this in Leof, for permanent storage. So the first thing I'd like you to do, well, the first thing is that this future techno center is really in the border, as you see in Fessenheim, which is in France, about 1.5 kilometers from Germany and 40 kilometers from Switzerland. So it's really, this cross-border is really tense here. It's happening. So the first, one of the things that has been done is that on the basis of the voluntary referral of EDF, as you know, in France, with these huge projects, they have the La Commission de Débat Public. So this commission of public debate, they organized this debate from October last year until February, and only a few weeks ago, this document became public. And so I'd like you now to map the stakeholders, to think about stakeholders, if you go to this QR code, but focusing on cross-border. Who could be for you stakeholders on cross-border, on this type of facilities, cross-border facilities? Who for you are the most relevant stakeholders? And if you allow me, if you cannot scan the QR code, you can go to the menti.com and enter this code, and hopefully it should work. And I'll go to see the word cloud that comes up. I'll leave you 3 seconds so that 30 seconds, I mean, not 3 seconds, 30 seconds. Okay, so we see local citizens, local community, government being one of the most relevant ones, local community as well, international organizations, the Swiss communities in the border, the German communities in the border, or the regulatory bodies, local businesses, scientific organizations, the public, industries, community leaders, regulator, tourists, politicians, operators, NGOs, NGOs, the farmers. So, okay. So really, well, really nice word cloud. Huh? We see some of them coming here. So I'll go back to the presentation and show you some of the people who were invited. So when we think about, okay. When we think about stakeholder mapping stakeholders, those who work on these issues, we start by asking these questions, and probably you ask these questions as well. So who is directly affected, who is indirectly affected, who makes decisions, who is interested, who is influential, who might oppose, who might support. Other questions we may ask ourselves is who is invited, who is not invited, why are they not invited, or why are they not participating? And then sometimes the process is more important than the outcome, and we may think about this type of questions if we really want to be inclusive on this. So when we were doing this exercise with a colleague of mine who is present in the call from SCK, we were thinking about trying to respond to all these questions. So who is directly, who is indirectly, who makes the decisions? And then we realized that actually all, if not most, or if not all of them, do have a cross-border, are impacted by cross-border relationships. So from the cross-border communities, the local residents, the workforce, the local businesses, the tourism, agriculture, some of the ones you were mentioning. I think most of the ones that you mentioned, the government also, it should be highlighted in black, I think, because they also have relationships, France with Germany, with Switzerland. They are in European also decision-making processes regarding these cross borders. The regions, the local authorities, environmental groups. Maybe one of the groups which were missing is the media. There are also some NGOs, even these three national NGOs, these three national nuclear protection action group between France and Germany and Switzerland, et cetera, et cetera. So all of them are really relevant for this. And so now we go to the arguments that were to the contents of this debate of the Techno Center. So the main positive arguments during this debate was that the Techno Center could contribute to the circular economy. So really that the very low-level waste, which will be recycled there, wouldn't go to the disposal, to the surface disposal site, and we would reduce the level of waste. And it really aligns with the circular economy principles, especially with this idea of reducing also the virgin raw materials and in the steel industry. So reducing the waste volume, reducing the pressure on the storage, really, and reducing the environmental footprint of the long-term waste management. Then some of the people defending this idea saw this as a technological innovation, and really the France as being a leader in the nuclear waste valorization and on the export of this waste. It would create jobs in an area which has lost a lot of jobs. It could create local economic benefits. It would repurpose the existing site, the industrial land and the infrastructure, so it would contribute to the regional economic continuity. However, there were obviously some opponents to this techno center. Well, and also there would be a strategic and long-term vision. So some of the main controversies in this debate were the concerns over the recycled material, the health, safety, and environmental concerns. So some people thought that there are trace amounts of residual radioactivity, and this could pose long-term hazards, long-term risks if they enter into the consumer products like kitchen or furniture. So they thought it was a risk for the public. Also, some people claim that there was a bias in the public debate. In fact, three NGOs decided to withdraw from the debate because they thought it was not balanced and it was not transparent, and it was favoring very much the proponents. So they thought it was more of a monologue than a genuine dialogue, a biased monologue. There were also trust issues and perceived greenwashing. The greenwashing was not really used per se, this concept, but it was said that they didn't trust neither the project nor the company's intentions, and that the project was saying to contribute to circular economy, to reducing waste, but it was really masking complexities, potential hazards, and it was the proponents were using environmental narratives to gain approval. Also some lack of transparency and information gaps in terms of no comprehensive, no reliable information, also limited data on the financial sustainability of the project, no clear explanation of how and where the recycled materials would be used. Also, this integration into the territory was not so clear cut. So the center would fit into this broader regional development, but really it's another nuclear facility, so it's not like a green innovation hub. It wouldn't mean diversification for this region. So some people would benefit, but there would be people who wouldn't benefit. And this was especially raised by the German communities and the German authorities nearby. And finally, the wider political and ethical questions. So the wider reflection on who decides about waste management. Is it the national authorities? Is it the companies? It's the local communities? And this cross-border consultation, is it really meaningful? But there were also some interesting suggestions and proposals from the public debate on this techno center, which make us to reflect based on also some ideas were based on this engagement, the need for engagement. For example, to establish an independent monitoring mechanism, a third party, an expert, not necessarily technical expert, but also experts from the community overseeing this radiation control. They could check the radiation themselves. They could monitor. This could ensure transparency. This would help build trust and having this kind of committee or mechanism. Then taking into account the German sensitivity, so acknowledging that there's a strong public concern and there's a historical context that needs to be considered. Also, there was this idea that there needs more research, more communication on the challenges, technical, economic, and societal challenges, that we need to support informed decision making. And it's through this research, deepening the understanding of some of these technical feasibility, economic viability, and the societal impacts of this project. Also clarifying the governance modes at each step to understand better the decision making. So who really makes the decisions, be clear about what is decided when in the licensing, during the selection, during the public consultation at the different phases. And then also there was this need for clarifying the radiation protection protocols for the workers. So some closing remarks. Really, stakeholder engagement we see is crucial for this effective decision-making in cross-border arrangements. And we'll see with the examples, the case studies from Arne also, that trust is really key word in this, and transparency builds trust, but this takes time as well. And then this continued dialogue ensures that the process is legal, is ethical, democratic, legitimate. We started with this rationale, so the dialogue, the interaction, the engagement, the knowledge is shared and all voices are heard and considered based on this respectful process. I leave you these three questions for further reflection. We don't have time, but what kind of information will help to understand and engage with cross-border arrangements? Where is it possible to get this information from? Is it from a trusted source? And again, trust is really important. So depending on who gives this information, this is a crucial aspect. How can local communities feel confident that neighboring countries are handling radioactive waste safely and transparently? And we see this with Germany. There was this lack of trust, probably these German communities, these German authorities don't trust these cross-border arrangements. Who should have a say in the decisions which may affect people across national borders? How far should public participation go? And with this, I think I give the word to Arne to continue with the interesting cases and the responses to one of the first slides. Yes,
Well,
yes, we
good.
see it, Arne. Yes.
Thank you. This part of the presentation relates to case studies. Based upon the experience of, I would say, hundreds and hundreds of cross-border projects performed where materials and waste have been shipped to Sweden, but also to other countries for treatment, and the later return of residues to the country of origin. There are lots of learnings gathered. In this presentation, I will give one example of a project which was never realized, and one project which have been recognized as a state-of-the-art project, how to do it in several perspectives, including stakeholder interaction. And finally, I will provide a third case study related to a new initiative in Sweden. And we see that as a good example to, in practice, intensify stakeholder interaction. To the Canadian steam generator projects. Back in 2009, there was a contract between the Bruce Power nuclear power company in Canada and the Swedish metal treatment facility. It was Studsvik at that time. It's Cyclife today. 32 steam generators were to be shipped for treatment. It was a possibility to release and recycle materials and at the same time reduce the amount for final repository volume in Canada. Everyone was happy. Everything looked good. This is a fantastic project. However, quite soon there became a quite intensive opposition, and there was a lot of NGOs, local residents, etc., who argued against the project. They claimed, for example, no justification has been given. There is alternatives to dispose the waste in Canada. Is there a policy for export of radioactive waste? Activity is misrepresented. No one wants this metal. It could be accident, and the components are misclassified. Whether this statement aligns with science or not, I leave to others to make the interpretation. But people listen to the voices raised about this. And then later on, in the beginning of 2011, the Canadian regulator came to a decision, and they have considered the information shared, the submissions, and the voice of the applicants and other participants. They considered that this is fine, everything is okay, and they issued a license to ship those steam generators to Sweden for treatment. However, the discussion continued and continued, and then in summer 2013, it was a statement done that the project is cancelled, and due to the delays caused by the public opposition. Those steam generators are still on the ground in Canada waiting for a solution. Some years later, the Canadian authority, CNSC, the president made a speech at the conference in Phoenix, Arizona, US, where they provided an overview and also reflections. And they noticed that there was concern. They had a lot of discussions with the politicians, mayors, councils, indigenous leaders, communities. They spent so much time on discussions. At the same time, they concluded that science showed that the steam generators were minimally radioactive and posed no real threat to public health or the environment, regardless of accidental scenario. There was not a risk. The Commission approved, as we have discussed, the request to ship these steam generators. But the public opposition resulted in that the project was cancelled and the generators still sit on the operator side. site. And that was a decision by the operator based upon the conditions. So this was the first case study. If we shift to the second one, which we consider and many consider as a success project, it related to big boilers from the Berkeley nuclear power plant in the UK. Facility operated up to 1989. The boilers were laid down in 1997, and they were aimed to stay on site until the 2070s. Big components, 8 boilers per reactor, 310 tons, 20 meters long, 5 meters in diameter, some dose rates, and also an experience aiming to cut it up on site in the 1990s, which was a less good experience. That is the context. One of the key activities done early in the projects was to have an early engagement, to meet the nuclear regulators, to meet the Environment Agency, to meet stakeholder groups, going to the different villages, visiting the pubs, interact with the people on board the different stakeholders, talk to the regulators in Sweden, which was the country of destination, with the Finnish regulator who was having the boat for the shipment, if other agencies, etc., etc., to onboard them. The shipment went well, very well. And there was a processing and recovery of loose material, size reduction, decontamination, smelting, casting of ingots for free release, aiming for recycling. And the summary of the results: in total, 15 boilers were shipped to treatment, 600 cubic meters each, 300 tons each. Out of the 310 tons, 296 tons were recycled back to the conventional industry. Only 8 cubic meters of residues per boiler, and a volume reduction of 98.7%. So it was almost a factor 100 in reduction. And upon closing of the projects, there was a lessons learned evaluation done. The identification of uncertainties and risks, and the early enabling and preparatory works. The stakeholder interactions, regulators, interested groups, site personnel, clients, contractors. Aim to sit down with them, answer to questions, and build trust. And then to have a collaboration between all involved parties. And at the end of the project, everyone was happy. If we then compare those two projects, one which failed and one which became a success story. In the communication, it was said that the Canadian steam generators, they were enormous in size. However, the UK boilers were 3 times larger in weight and a factor 10 larger in volume. And you can see them here when they're passing through a village, with people watching the transport through the village, of interest and pleased to have those components shipped off the neighborhood. The specific activity was a little bit higher in the Canadian steam generators, but still on very low levels. The transport in the UK was significantly more challenging than in Canada, with all the villages and all other challenges to pass through, but still fully safe. And people, they appreciated the initiative. And at the end of the project, the British components were recycled through the conventional industry for treatment of new products, while the Canadian steam generators still sit on the ground in Canada waiting for a solution. The onboarding of the key stakeholders went well in the UK, but failed in Canada. And then is the question, why? What went wrong? And I think there are lots of explanations on this, but the early communication is, in my view, one of the key aspects. Because if people believe that you're not trustful and that you get other stories told, it's very hard to change the process back again. So the third and last case study, it's related to the development of a guidance for the receivers, the takers of free released materials and waste coming from the nuclear industry. And the purpose of this was to give those who handles, receives, or treat a free released material from the nuclear industry an understanding of what does it mean with clearance, and how does the associated process look like. And typical parties who come in contact with the free release material, transporters, conventional waste companies, recycling industry, metal melting facility, they were the target group to write something, a handbook for them to be used. This project, which was led by the Swedish Radiation Safety Authority, was set up with a reference group, a working group with participations from the Swedish Waste Management Organization, which working with the conventional waste in Sweden, the Swedish steel industry, recycling and waste disposal industries, as well as the participants from the nuclear industries, the companies doing the free release material. So we worked a lot together in this, trying to understand each other and trying to put things together in a way that it was understandable for the people. If we have a look on the conducted activities, we had a lot of reference groups meetings. We had one open seminar in person with very good attendance where people could put questions, discuss, build networks. We also had one open webinar because it was during the COVID time, which also was very well attended. It was also arranged visits to the nuclear power plant for the interested parties to see how is the work conducted in practice, to see what does it mean and how do people look like, what are they doing, how does it work. And then finally, we put everything together into a handbook. If we have a look on the topics discussed, meetings and webinars hosted by the regulatory body, to exemplify what is the material and waste which is free released, which are the radiation sources in the nuclear power plant, what does it mean, what is radioactive contamination, the different types of radiation, and how does it affect me as an individual, other radiation sources in society and natural background radiation, to have something to refer to. Information about typical radiation doses in Sweden, because this was focusing on Sweden, the background doses and other which we meet in our daily life. Information about regulation of clearance of materials, clearance and free release in practice. How does the work look like? The people doing the work were present with instruments, etc., to show how it works in practice. And a few examples from this. The first one is to describe the process, to see that it is a well-described process with a lot of different steps in the process, which is well documented, up to a decision whether it's subject to clearance free release or it has to be disposed as a radioactive waste. And also to say and to share the guidance handbooks for the people within the nuclear industry. Those are not any hidden documents. They are available for download whether you're a Swedish citizen or from any other countries, they are there. And it's both when it comes to clearance of materials, but also when it comes into the commissioning of nuclear facilities. How does it work? How could we guarantee that it's fully safe to manage and receive clear material? And then to set the context, because those are many questions coming up, because there is not that much understanding of that radioactivity is something we have all around us and within our own bodies, and also to share the difference between what is acceptable to clearance and what is the average dose to the people living in the countries. What does it mean to get to the dentist, to fly with an airplane, eating a banana or whatever? And this is to give the message that if you receive pre-released materials, you don't have to consider the radiological parts in this. There is no reason for concern. And to put that into practical examples, I think made a big difference and was highly appreciated. Finally, about this guidance, the handbook. It will be a handbook with an introduction to set the scene, a chapter providing the basic terms, what is clearance, free release, who is allowed to do it, what can and cannot be free released, why is it done, a chapter regarding the regulatory framework, how it's built up and how both the industry and the regulators can say this is safe. To discuss radiological contamination and associated health risks. Not saying that a health risk would declare material, but to set the scene in the broader perspective. A chapter related to the clearance and
Aha.
release of materials.
Direi.
And finally, to provide an overview, and
Mhm.
finally, to provide
Ja.
references. And the good thing related to this is that this handbook is now approved and will be published shortly. It will be published in Swedish, but I guess it can be translated to other countries as well. That was the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.